In this video of the Historic Ordnance series, we are going to look at another improvised mine that actually went into production. This is the Soviet TMB series low metallic anti-tank mine. Now reportedly the Soviets produced these from 1940 to 1941. By 1942 their industry had improved. Their materials availability had improved for making more complex, better anti-tank mines. And then this at that point was just used up. They did not produce any more past December of 1941, reportedly. Now, in this mine series family, there is the TMB1, the TMB2, and the TMS-B. All of them are constructed the same, and the only difference is the size. What you see here is all the information for the TMB2. Now, these mines, from what I can dig up, and it's very little on this, we know they were employed by the Soviet Union. They have been encountered in Afghanistan, and they were encountered by U.S. troops in Vietnam. Some of them were also found in other areas across the Middle East, such as Syria, and I think Algeria was mentioned. And I came across a reference that some of these were encountered in Angola. Now, the technicals on this are, the TMB2 is 10 3/4 inches in diameter, 6 inches in height. Weight is 15.5 pounds, of which explosive filler is 11 pounds. And the explosive filler was two different types. The initial run was powdered amytal. Later, near the end of the run, as they got better materials, they started filling them with TNT. And my guess is it's probably flake TNT. There was a booster inside here that the detonator was put into. And that booster was around 4 ounces of, at first, tetrol, later TNT. The fuse on this is the MV5, and it used an MD2 detonator, which is the bottom part here. Everything I came across inside Russian literature on this stuff said that this was the first mine that employed the MV5 fuse system. Now, these mines were made out of cardboard. It was constructed in 3 pieces. The pressure plate, top part of the mine, bottom part of the mine. From what I found out of Russia, it said how these were done. They made the cardboard, and it was thicker type cardboard. Think along the line of MRE box, not your corrugated or the type you have in a cereal box. So we're talking thicker stuff here. That stuff was soaked to get it wet. It was then put into forms, and it was pressed into shape. Once it dried, they took it out. They then coated or soaked each piece here, all 3 pieces, with linseed oil, and some of them were painted. But it said that wasn't always the case, and I also came across some stuff that said they were painted, they didn't use linseed oil. Basically, it's whatever the production facility, the factory, had on hand when they produced it. Now, after the linseed oil dried enough, they put it together, the top piece, the bottom piece together, and glued those 2 pieces together. They had the filler hole here down on the bottom. They filled this up with explosive. There was a cardboard liner here, a cardboard tube, which acted as their fuse well. Filled the explosive inside here, and then closed it off with a piece of cork, according to Russian info. They then brought in the top piece here, taped it to the side of our main part of the mine here, and then they covered the entire thing in tar or asphalt. They did that to waterproof it. Once that was done, they added a glass fuse well cap onto this. Now, there are notes that these mines, the Russians found out, were easily neutralized with moisture, especially rain. So because of that, that's why it had such a short production run. But they did use lots of these in the beginning of the war. And when the Russians used these, reportedly it was in mixed minefields. As in mixed, it's not anti-personnel and anti-tank. They would have some of these mixed into minefields with mines that were more easily detected by the mine-laying team. And the reason for that is this was meant to be an anti-tank mine, but the poundage on these was so low, very easily that mine clearance team could miss it because there was so little metal in it. 1940s technology couldn't pick up that fuse in here, and one of those deminers might accidentally step on top of it and set it off. Now, the Russians intended that it was supposed to have a 200-pound in activation pressure. However, the U.S. Army found during the Korean War in the 1950s, the activation pressure on these was only 26 pounds. So because of that, nowadays this could be classified as an anti-personnel mine, but during World War II it was meant as an anti-vehicular or anti-tank. And even during World War II they said these things were not, incredibly powerful, but they had enough of a charge in them that they could shred the tire, damage the part of the vehicle that drove over the top of it, or if a tank rolled over the top of it, it could break the track and potentially tear up some road wheels that were nearby. It wasn't enough to breach the bottom of the tank, but it was enough to immobilize it. Now, there are no secondary fuse wells on this, but the U.S. Army said the ones they encountered, especially in Korea, very easily the sapper could take a knife, make an improvised fuse well on the bottom or the side here, and attach a booby trap device. Now, the Soviets declared these obsolete with the introduction of the TM-57 anti-tank mine in the late 1950s. Combat life on this in a wet environment, only a few days. And that's according to Russian literature. But, as I said, one of the locations where they are encountering these, even now, is Afghanistan. And my guess is, if these are still being found in Afghanistan, those are probably ones that are filled with TNT, not amytal, because it did say in the literature that the moisture not only turned the cartboard into garbage, even though it was impregnated and protected with asphalt, the cartboard would just fall apart, it would disintegrate. But the moisture would also neutralize the powdered amytal inside here. So then the only thing that would be explosive in it would be the fuse, the detonator, with the booster charge. Not enough to damage a vehicle at that point, but that type of charge is more than enough to take off a foot of an enemy soldier. Now, how were these installed? Very straightforward, very basic, because it was designed as by the Soviets as an improvised mine, because they anticipated they might end up having to use them soon. So, first step, like with any mine, is inspect the mine, the fuse, the detonator, and the booster charge. The Russians state that the booster charge was already in the mine. According to the U.S. Army, the stuff they recovered in Korea, the booster charge was separate. So inspect each component for serviceability. If everything passes, you box it up and you take it to the location where the mine's going to be employed. I should make the note here that with the way the Russians, or I should say the Soviets, did their stuff, the mines would have been in one box, the MV5 fuse would have been in a different box, the MD2 detonator would have had its own separate box, And the booster charge would have had its own separate box also. There would have been multiple inside each case, but they were not packaged together. They came in separate boxes that you had to take the parts from. Now, at the location where the mine was going to be emplaced, this was intended to be buried. I did not come across anything that said these were surface laid. So you would dig a hole for the size of the mine to fit down inside. You wanted the top of the mine just a little bit over the top of the ground, or you wanted enough area widened around the top of the mine here that a vehicle driving over the top would crush the top of the mine, the pressure plate. You didn't want it to bridge over the top. So once you had the hole dug, you lowered the mine down inside. And then you stabilized it with soil around the outside to keep it from moving. You then unscrewed the fuse well cap here. Set that to the side. You then inserted the booster charge down into the fuse well with the open end facing up. And this would have been a standard explosive block, most likely. Then you took the MV5 detonator and you screwed on, or the MV5 fuse, you screwed on the MD2 detonator. You then inserted with 2 fingers the MV5 fuse assembly here down into the booster charge, and you made sure it was below the top of the mine here, because you didn't want to accidentally set it off when you were putting the fuse well cap back on. It passes your little visual inspection. You then replaced the fuse well cap, screwed it back in there, and then camouflaged the mine. It's already armed, already ready to go. There is no safety clips, no safety pins on the MV5 detonator. That's why the Russians, or I should say the Soviets, declared them technically obsolete in the 1950s and went with more safer designs in their later mine series. Now, location of these mines is damn difficult according to deminers that have come across these. Even now, it's really hard to find. The only metal content is the MV5 detonator. It can be detected with modern metal detectors, but it still can be difficult depending on the distance the mine is in the ground. So, for removal on this, you locate the mine, you find the general area it's at. You then check around it for booby traps on anti-personnel mines that are put in to protect that mine. If you come across that stuff, neutralize that as you come across it. You then locate your mine. You then uncover it, and you check the mine for anti-handling devices on the side and underneath. If an anti-handling device is found, stop what you're doing, destroy the mine in place. Do not continue further in the removal process. If no anti-handling device is found, you restabilize the mine. You unscrew the glass fuse well cap from the top here. Use 2 fingers to reach down inside, grasp the top part of the MV5 fuse here, and gently, and it says that in the U.S. Army manual from the 50s, gently remove it from the mine. Once you have the fuse out of the mine, you separate the 2 components, set them to the side. You then screw back on the fuse well cap and remove the mine from the hole. Turn in all pieces to the mine dump for either disposal or reuse. These mines, you may notice I didn't give you a color. That's because it's basically the color of the tar or the asphalt they used on it. Most of the mines that have been recovered right now by EOD and deminers, they report, are more of a brownish color. When these were brand new, they were more of a blackish color from that tar or asphalt. So they have faded over time. So these mines, your chance of encountering them, pretty low. Unless you're in Afghanistan, That's probably one of the few locations where these mines might still be dangerous. Maybe some of the countries in the Middle East that had them in the past, but a lot of those minefields would have been cleared by now. So your chance of coming across them in Europe is non-existent. Your chance of coming across them in Africa is really low, and if you did come across them in Africa, more than likely they got so wet that they're probably falling apart by this point. I have not come across anything that says these are being used in Ukraine, because I got a feeling what happened with these mines is similar to what the Soviets did with the RG-42 improvised hand grenade. Once it was declared obsolete, they shipped them out to wards of liberation around the world until there was none left. And if they found any later still hidden in the back of a bunker, they just said, hey, we can't use these anymore, and just destroyed them. Because by that point, they would have had better mine models in existence. This mine is not one of those that they probably kept around inside emergency war stocks, because it's improvised. It's made out of cardboard. It's not going to store well. And it does not last very well in the field. But there you go. The Soviet TMB mine series from World War II, used in wars of liberation afterwards. Now, for all my engineer brothers in the Patriot and militia movements, always remember essayons.